The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's revelation.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
I'm an American. I have rights.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is July 14th, Monday. We're going to talk about the Epstein distraction. I'm not saying that it's not important. It is important, obviously. But there's a bigger conspiracy afoot. And that's what we're going to be addressing today. We're going to have a sort of a short episode today. I do have some other things to get to this morning, so. All right, without any further ado, let's read the headlines for today, Monday, July 14th. All right, we're going to start with some good news today. Folks aren't really discussing this at all because everybody's just talking about Epstein. But the U.S. customs duties top $100 billion for the first time in a fiscal year ever in United States history. U.S. Treasury reports small budget surplus for June. Gross custom duties reach $27 billion in June. Again, another record. Besant says U.S. reaping rewards of Trump's tariff agenda. Treasury chief also says that U.S. tariff revenue could reach $300 billion in 2025. Unprecedented raising of revenue this way. So you can understand why he's threatening more tariffs on Mexico and Canada and the EU, excuse me. This is very important. And I wanted to get this out front because this is really the breaking news. The mainstream news doesn't really want to report it, or they're certainly not putting it in front of the forecast. But that's the whole point of the new trade agenda, is to raise revenue, but also raise revenue while trying to strike fairer trade deals as far as the United States is concerned. We're going to keep moving on here, though, and what is at the crux of all this, and the left is really having a field day. The Atlantic is reporting conspiracy theorists are turning on the president. MAGA influencers are furious that Trump's FBI says no more Jeffrey Epstein secrets are forthcoming. Well, there's really not much to say here except that very well might be true. Are there more Epstein secrets? People want to know what the client list is. Well, there's no actual client list. Jeffrey didn't keep. There was a black book, according to court records. Ghislaine Maxwell had a black book, so that might very well be the list. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. So why people are calling it the Epstein list when it's actually the Maxwell list, which might have even come from Ghislaine's father at some point. So this is the important part of the question. The reason the DOJ and the FBI put out that memo saying case closed is because of this. Just the News is reporting. DOJ informs court of ongoing review of Epstein documents in Judicial Watch FOI case. So it's a Freedom of Information case. On Monday, the DOJ and Judicial Watch filed a joint status report regarding the watchdog groups, that's Judicial Watch, April lawsuit over FOI request it filed in February over the Epstein records. Part of Judicial Watch's request was records for depicting the identities or clients or associates of Jeffrey Epstein. Does it make sense to you now that the reason they had to say that there's no more is because of this FOI request? Now, if you're not in journalism, anybody really could make an FOI request. This is Judicial Watch. It's not a journalistic outlet, but anybody is public records request. So, but journalists, media outlets do it often to try to get information that the government is trying to bury. And this is exactly what it's about. So people don't understand that. It's Tom Fenton here. The watchdog groups filed the lawsuit against both the DOJ and the FBI after they failed to adequately respond to 3 separate FOI requests. In the joint status report the Judicial Watch released Thursday, it says that regarding all Epstein records, the FBI has run its initial searches and is in the process of reviewing those search results for records of communications of FBI Director. See, this is where it gets a little sticky. FBI Director Kash Patel regarding the Epstein client list. The FBI's search efforts are ongoing, according to the report. But I thought there's nothing else to report. They're telling the public. Yet in the FBI request, they're saying that that there is something there and that they're looking, and that they have to say they're looking because it is a request. So they admitted they have this information, and the fact is we need to go to Ghislaine Maxwell next. The report was filed a day after Joint Justice Department FBI memo obtained by the news outlet Axios was published, in which it said a systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. There's also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions, nor did it uncover evidence that it could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. So, the status report was filed a day after the memo the Justice Department filed that said there's nothing to be seen here. That's the reason they said that, is because of this FOI request. So the FOI request, which is interfering with intelligence, specifically the CIA and others, they're saying you can't fulfill this FOI request for Judicial Watch. So as part of that, they come out publicly with this memo and said there's nothing to be seen here. The case is closed. There is no client list whatsoever. But Fenton and Judicial Watch and their lawyers are going to keep pressing. People going out on X and going, show us the client list. It's out there. You know, screw you, Pam Bondi. That doesn't do anything. But actual lawsuits do if you're having an FOI request against the FBI. And then, so during the lawsuit, you could actually say, well, there is evidence that there is evidence. So when we could go back to Ghislaine Maxwell as well. There's more here. The Justice Department and the FBI are sending out contradictory messages telling the American people that there are no more Epstein material will be released, while telling the federal court in our case that the Epstein FOI review is proceeding. Tom Fenton said. He's the Judicial Watch guy. But no matter, our FOI lawsuit for the Epstein material continues. We will be relentless in demanding transparency under the law. So does everybody get the clear picture now? They're trying to stonewall the FOI request by putting out this memo. But the problem is they could easily stonewall people on X going, where's the client list? But you can't stonewall a lawsuit. So Judicial Watch and Fenton are going to proceed, and they will likely uncover something. All you folks on X, probably with your stomping of the feet and gesticulations, aren't going to get much headway. Because after all, as I said many times before, it's national security. and they can stonewall and obfuscate all they want. All they have to do is say national security issue. It might be very well be a national security issue. The funny thing about this is, however, we're getting from the Daily Wire, put up or shut up, Dems suddenly want Trump administration to disclose Epstein Files. Who are the rich and powerful being protected? Yeah, really, the left? The left had plenty of opportunity to pursue this, but didn't. You know, when Biden was in power. They have no interest in doing this. They think, there's some people on the left that happen to think that actually Trump is implicated somehow. And you know what? I'm not saying that that's not true. A lot of people are saying it's not true. But don't forget, Alex Acosta or the prosecutor in Florida, a lot of the things that obfuscated this whole case happened under Trump. I'm just saying that you can't excuse that whatsoever. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? Donald Trump asked in a post on Truth Social in which he defended Attorney General Pam Bondi. Like I said, I don't think this is a canard. I think it's very important to the base. But it's first of all, it's red meat for the left. Because if it's going to hurt Trump and it's hurting Trump, they're going to go ahead with this. Actually, on Friday, on the 5, the token liberal there on the panel, Jessica Tarloff, she started sounding like a conspiracy theorist. It was all, what about the shooting? We don't have answers from the assassination. We don't have answers from the second assassination attempt. And we don't have answers from the Epstein client list. Brings us to the AFP. Trump calls for MAGA base to end Epstein Files obsession. What's going on with my boys, and in some cases gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job, Trump said on Saturday in a lengthy post on Truth Social. We are on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it, including people on the left. All over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein, he added, referring to his Make America Great Again movement. Many among the MAGA faithful have long contended that the so-called deep state actors were hiding information on Epstein's elite associates. Very possibly true. Next, the DOJ will say, actually, Jeffrey Epstein never existed. Furious pro-Trump conspiracy theorist Alex Jones tweeted, after last week's move, it's sickening. And then it goes on to say, far-right influencer Laura Loomer called for Trump to fire Bondi over the issue, labeling her an embarrassment. But on Saturday, Trump came to the defense of the Attorney General, suggesting that the so-called Epstein files were a hoax perpetrated by the Democratic Party for political gain without specifying what benefits they hope to attain. Anything that'll ruin Trump, they're going to pursue. This is my problem, is that whatever Trump wants to do, I don't really care. But Trump comes across as a narcissist and a megalomaniac when he starts suggesting that the America First party, what became Trumpism or MAGA, didn't start with him and won't end with him. He seems to think that it's his movement, and to some degree, maybe yes, but mostly no. It's not. He is the vehicle for what people already wanted before he even came on the scene. And to be honest with you, if you know how Trump was drafted into the movement, you would understand it more that Trump is a vehicle for what this section of the Republican Party, the libertarian-leaning constitutionalists, bring back the Republic, constitutional reform party, the Tea Party. It all existed before Trump and will exist long after Trump. So it's not one team MAGA, because that's not really true. It's a coalition of constitutionalists and libertarians, really, and some conservatives to some degree. The problem is with Epstein, I say it time and time again, it's a distraction. It's misdirection. People are focusing on this. You go on the internet, oh my God, every video, every X post is Epstein this, Epstein that. Fuck Epstein. Is it important? Yes. Is child trafficking, child sexual abuse, is that endemic in America? Fuck yeah. But sexual perversion, unless it results in like snuff films and stuff, sure, protecting children, very important. But sexual perversion does not compete with the fact that your democracy, your republic, is undermined by a political power elite that use anything and everything which is really at their disposal to keep you or your elected officials from exercising true power. Your power as the electorate. That's what they don't want. They want to keep doing things the way they want them done and screw everybody else. So if they're shipping your manufacturing jobs off to China, or they're undermining your currency, whatever they do, or they flirt with World War III and foreign wars, as been pointed out with the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency, this is not what the people want. It's actually the opposite of what people want. So why does it keep happening? Let's scurry along with this a little further. So, One American News is reporting, Tucker Carlson suggests Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent. Every single person in Washington, D.C. thinks that. Yeah, was he? Wasn't he? Sure. I mean, it seems that Alex Acosta's statement, he's owned by intelligence, is going to live out in infamy. So whether it's the CIA or the Mossad or both, people have to understand the Club of Bern was sort of like the Five Eyes of the intelligence agencies, is that the global elite work cohesively for the most part, without much double crossing. If you know the way the elite work, they're all working the same, and the one that betrays their oath, which is to keep it all secret, gets ganged up on by the rest. So the true power of the global elite is the global intelligence agencies that work cohesively. They share information, and sure, they protect their own national sovereignty and their own power, but they're working in tandem in a lot of things. So if you think the Mossad was running Jeffrey Epstein and the CIA didn't know anything about it, that's bullshit. So it goes on to say, right-wing political commentator Tucker Carlson demanded that deceased child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, if we believe he's deceased, was working with Israel intelligence during his Friday speech at Turning Point USA Student Action Summit. And then they talk about Alex Acosta, who was a federal prosecutor in Florida, U.S. attorney in Miami, who was in charge of the Epstein prosecution, said very plainly, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence. He didn't say the CIA. He didn't say Mossad. He said intelligence. If you ever talk to people that are in these circles, they say intelligence with a broad stroke. Intelligence means part of the intelligence community. And when, for political and media purposes, they talk about the intelligence community in the United States, they're talking about all the different intelligence agencies, the American intelligence agency. But realistically, when you talk about intelligence, you talk about the broader global intelligence community. And that means adversaries as well. They have the intelligence summit every year in Singapore, I think, where intelligence meets, including Chinese communist intelligence and American intelligence and Israeli intelligence and Saudi intelligence and, Bulgarian intelligence. They all go there and they all hang out together. It's a community. Now, do they work against each other? But it's also sort of a brotherhood. So the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was, he wasn't kidnapping children, right? These young teenagers were going under their own volition and they were getting paid. That doesn't change things, but it's not in the same category as people abducting or otherwise procuring young children under, preteens and younger for sex abuse, snuff films, etc. People don't want to make those into categories where they are, because it's one thing if you hurt children, but if you kill them, killing is worse than abusing. Child abuse is bad, but killing is worse. But this is a big distraction about how the intelligence community runs things, because they have their tentacles and agents and assets everywhere. So when you talk about Butler, that was run by intelligence. That kid was run by intelligence. And I don't, of course, that article fell by the wayside again. It was some research I was doing with Thomas Crooks, and it plainly said that he bought the rifle from his father. Both his parents are leftist social workers, right? And at the same time he bought the rifle from his father, of course it can't be traced because he bought it from his father, so he was keeping his profile low. He got encrypted apps on his phone to start. Who would he communicate with? His dad? Is he using that to communicate with his dad? Apparently, they said he was communicating people on foreign soil. Intelligence. I'll tell you that time and time again is they call you, hey, I'm with the CIA. You want to be a secret agent? And some lonely kid, young man, whose life isn't very exciting, all of a sudden his life becomes exciting. And the next thing they do, they walk you down the road to do something outrageous. All right, let's get back to the OAN article here. I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of Intel Services, probably not American, says Tucker Carlson. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan? Where did all the money come from? Follow the money, as we all know. Goes on to say this is extremely obvious to anybody who watches this. This guy had direct connections with foreign government. Now no one's allowed to say that the foreign government is Israel because we've been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. It's not naughty. But like I said, okay, Israel, how divorced is Israeli intelligence from Israel? So let's take the CIA, for example. How divorced is the CIA from the United States government? It's pretty divorced. Most intelligence is controlled by money, by the power elite throughout the world, right? Sure, they got a little American flag on their desk and they say they're working for the United States government. Just like politicians in Washington. A lot of times they're not working for the United States government, which is supposed to be for the people of the United States. You know that's not true. It works for special interest, big money interest. And that's always been the case. I think the OSS was probably more involved with the United States government democratically. But when the CIA was formed, they already had an idea of who it's going to be working for. And you have the New World Order at the time with the Bretton Woods Accords and all that. They knew exactly what they were doing. And they still know. It's obvious to anyone who watches that this guy to correct direction with a foreign government. Yep. It's very naughty. But that's like, I'm not Israel. If Israel's going to look out for their own interests, they're going to look out for their own interests. What I'm trying to tell people is the intelligence community globally is run part and parcel by the elites. Sure, they have overlings, they take orders from people that work within this supposed government agency, but the policies they forward are for the elite. All right, and now we're going to get to the crux of the matter here. U.S. government to seek to block Ghislaine Maxwell's request for retrial. Alan Dershowitz argued Maxwell was made a primary target following Epstein's death, and she is in part a victim of the disgraced financier. Alan Dershowitz, who I never, ever, I like him as an esteemed legal scholar, and I like that he likes Trump, and I read his book, and, it's all good. But come on. I mean, he's not implicated in this whole Epstein thing, and he's defending Ghislaine Maxwell, and he says, no, she's a victim. She's not part. She's the one that procured the young women. She was the one whose father was working for Mossad. So and he wants to block her retrial. Why? Because things that are admissible in court are a public record. But former Trump associate Alan Dershowitz has publicly advocated for blocking the retrial. Certainly she would get commutation. The sentence was way, way, way in excess of anything she was alleged to have done, procuring young minors for sex. Dershowitz argued Maxwell was made a primary target following Epstein's death, and she was part of victim. The issue here is, again, this is all distraction, but the issue is here, like the FOI request from Judicial Watch, is she's got a fucking black book. It was referred to in court during her trial. And the judge sealed it. Why? Doesn't pertain to her case. Now, Trump said, and others are saying, yeah, are there some people that may be in a book or on a list or something that may not have done anything as far as molesting young children? Young children. It shouldn't be young teenagers. Just to be clear. Not that I advocate for that anyway. The law is in the United States what the law is. You want to change the law for consensual sex to have it under 18? I don't know anybody who's going to vote for that. But the issue is that she had a black book. If she decided to have a retrial, well, I guess Dershowitz said he wants a retrial. I don't know. I think that little black book should be administered into evidence and should not be sealed, should be unsealed. And we should know who's in that little back. So everybody's talking about Epstein, talking about Pam Bondi. They're talking Pam Bondi. The U.S. government is seeking to block Ghislaine Maxwell's request for a retrial. So Pam Bondi is blocking the retrial. Why? She might be proven to be a liar. I don't know. I don't care. But the point is, if Ghislaine Maxwell wants a retrial, give her a retrial. I don't care if Ghislaine Maxwell's in prison or not. What I care is that the information is made public. And that only can happen in a court trial. That's why with all these mass shootings and all these things, it's like, because in a trial, evidence came out. Did you actually read the transcripts from the Boston bombing trial? No. If someone is killed, you don't have to try them. It's just like Sandy Hook. You'll never find out what really happened at Sandy Hook because there was no trial. But if someone is taken alive, do you find out anything? Do we know anything about the trial of Nicholas Cruz? I don't even think he's been tried yet. How come? People that commit crimes and survive, the whole point of the trial is to get as much information out of them as you can. Regardless if they go to if they use it to prosecute them, great. The point being is that a lot of this is all a distraction and we're not getting information. Stamping your feet and freaking out over it isn't going to get the information released. You're going to put political pressure on Trump. You're just going to ruin him politically. And you already see the Democrats are taking advantage of the base being upset. So pissing and whining isn't going to get them to release information. You're going to say what? You're going to say, I'm not going to, I don't like Trump anymore because he didn't do, what is that? He's already in office. He can't run for re-election. You're not doing anything. You should support Trump. There might be good reason. The evidence may be destroyed. We don't know. We don't know. You only know what you know. And since we don't know anything, you can't start making accusations like you think you know something. We don't know. In any case, distraction. Let's get to the real story that no one's fucking talking about. First of all, we got to get to the grand conspiracy, but first, I usually have a video. I was going to play this segment from Rand Paul on Face the Nation yesterday, but I'm just going to go to this article instead. Politico, Senator Rand Paul sees cultural cover-up about Trump shooting last July. Now, this is Politico. They're an organ of the CIA. It's like Axios and all these newfangled, media organizations. If you look at the interview, and usually I play these interviews, I might end up putting it up on YouTube later. I just didn't have time this morning. Senator Rand Paul says, doesn't see, he says there is a cultural cover-up. And when he says cultural cover-up, he means intelligence culture, government culture, political culture to not release things. And it's not about the Trump shooting. It's involving the Trump assassination attempt last July. Rand Paul called for a congressional oversight of the Secret Service, complaining a cultural cover-up that he claimed masked critical security failures before the attack. Now, we're going to go through this step by step. Here's the thing. It was a fucking conspiracy. The kid was set up as a patsy. Did he actually take the shots? I'm sure he did. Was there another sniper? Very well could have been. I believe there was maybe one other sniper, and I think he fired just the one shot, the first one. Hard to determine at this point. We didn't get any ballistics, right? The guy's dead. There's not going to be a trial, right? It's not a cultural cover-up. It's a fucking conspiracy. They could refer to it as a cultural cover-up, but we're talking about how the crime was investigated. This notion that it was a lone wolf. Then why was he? Who was he sending encrypted messages to? That very nature makes it a conspiracy. Of course it has to be a lone wolf, because if they're two people, then it's a fucking conspiracy. Somebody was begging for security in both writing and phone calls, but was repeatedly denied resources by the Secret Service. So, who was controlling the government at the time? The Biden administration. The Biden administration, not Joe Biden. Other deep state bureaucrats. The reason they withheld extra security was because they knew they were going to assassinate him. The only reason they gave him counter sniper folks is because they needed to be able to take out the assassin. Because if Thomas Crooks was ever captured alive, what would he have said? And of course, they can't break into these encrypted fucking communication apps. They did not want to assess blame or look internally. You mean like the FBI? And they wanted to discount any of their actions that may have led to this, Rand Paul said. Of course, that's what a conspiracy does. The conspiracy doesn't say, you got me. The conspiracy says, no, they're to blame. No, they're to blame. There's no way the director of the Secret Service did not know the request has been made. Again, this is you're dicking around with a little fact that they were denied security until they were given counter snipers the very day an assassination attempt would be made. And then Tom Cotton also chimes in. Under the Biden administration, the Secret Service simply was not responsive to the request, not only from the Trump campaign, but the head of his security detail, Sean Curran, who is now the head of the Secret Service as well. No one would actually admit to being in charge of the security in Butler. They're all pointing at each other. And they were not going to discipline anybody until I subpoenaed and asked what they had done. But in the end, nobody was fired. Said Paul, I think an investigation of the Secret Service was inadequate. That's why we need congressional oversight. So basically, because Rand Paul subpoenaed, that's the only reason we found out the information that some people had been given a slap on the wrist, and some people were only given a slap on the wrist that very day the information was released. So nobody was disciplined. Some people were even promoted. Here's the thing about the assassination attempt. It was a conspiracy to kill Trump. Period. We knew that was going to happen, and it happened. And to think that it happened, this strange young man did it on his own, how he avoided rings and rings of security, and then just when he climbed up on the roof, the people that were overlooking the roof, the sniper team in that window, mysteriously went down from that room and got locked out of the building. I mean, come on. And then one of those snipers apparently took the shot that disabled Crooks's weapon. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And then the cop went up on the roof. And then Crooks turned around with his weapon. Instead of the cop drawing his gun and firing, he fell off the roof. And the most prominent thing is, as soon as he reached the apex on the right side of the roof, I think it was the north side, where he was witnessed by the crowd, he realized he didn't have a clean sight to the president. But the sniper team could have seen him there. Plus, there were people on the ground pointing up at the roof. What, the sniper and counter snipers are so trained? Where were they? What were they looking at? Balloons? They wouldn't notice people on the ground pointing up at the roof and then train their attention there? No. And as I said, The only way he could have got to the other side of the roof in time to start firing when they said the firing started was he would have had to get up and run across the roof. And you could see him. He's at the apex of the roof. You could see him from the ground. He was not obscured by from the snipers. The snipers could have taken him out at any time. Instead, and if you look at the counter snipers, they're trained looking right at that roof. They see a guy running with a rifle alongside a roof and they don't take him out. They allow him to get prone and take 8 shots. In sniper time, in shooting time, in war time, and killing time, that's an eternity. All right. Now to the other part of the grand conspiracy. Just the news. FBI opens grand conspiracy probe on weaponization, opening a door to special prosecutor. The FBI has quietly launched an investigation into a decade of Democratic Party and deep state antics from Russia collusion to Jack Smith, opening the door for the appointment of a special prosecutor to examine whether the well-documented episodes amount to a criminal conspiracy to meddle in 3 U.S. elections and benefits the Democrats at the detriment of Donald Trump. Really? You think? And then you add in the assassination attempt. It is indeed a grand conspiracy. The grand conspiracy case was opened several weeks ago after new FBI Director Kash Patel took over, and it could get a significant boost if Trump were to declassify 2 secret tranches of evidence that identified a potential ignition point to the alleged conspiracy in the summer of 2016. Yeah, duh. And that's the problem is like, oh, conspiracy theorists, the Atlantic, the conspiracy theorists. And that's what they do about drumming up this Epstein thing. And they did this with UFOs and other shit too. They make it like, oh, that the conspiracy theorists are crazy. Tinfoil hat thing, but the reality is here you have it in plain view. It's obviously conspiracy if you have Peter Strzok emailing another cohort, his girlfriend at the time, Lisa Page, and then them talking about meeting with Christopher Wray or whoever, not Christopher Wray, but whoever else was working the FBI then. That's 3 people discovering about an insurance policy to keep Trump from becoming president. That's a fucking conspiracy. But now we know all the things about Crossfire Hurricane. The fudging the warrants for the FISA court. The very illegal surveillance of the Trump campaign and then the Trump presidency. And then Comey even admitting, we're going to get General Flynn, and we're going to get there early before they know what's going on. And we just need to talk to you. And then use what they say as entrapment. A famous FBI ploy. And there's more. There's more conspiracy. Now, whether this is legitimate or not, I don't know. PJ Media, why is the Minnesota shooter saying Tim Walsh will cover up his real motive? A letter discovered in Bolter's, Vance Bolter, who was the Minnesota political assassin. Abandoned vehicle changed everything. In a rambling, incoherent page-and-a-half screed, Bolter claimed that he was acting under supposed orders from Democratic Governor Tim Walz, and that assassinated Senator Klobuchar was somehow necessary to clear the path for Walz to run for the U.S. Senate. Almost overnight, the story was memory hold. The media dropped it like a hot rock. Yeah, that's what I said. I go, this was supposed to be, a Republican going after, because all the political violence was on the left. Now you have a right-winger going and shooting leftist politicians. Whether he was in orders from Tim Walz or not, I think maybe he was, but I don't think the orders were so he could get her Senate seat. I think whatever it was is they were going to tie this to Trump. They even had that guy, his roommate, say, oh, he's a Trump supporter. And yeah, he killed everybody because of Trump and abortion or whatever. Turned out not to be true. And it turned out that none of what that guy said, the roommate, can be corroborated. He flatly rejected the idea, and this is Butler, who was talking to Axios, I believe, or the New York Post. He flatly rejected the idea that his rampage was politically motivated, stating unequivocally that neither Trump nor pro-life beliefs played any role in his actions. You are fishing, and I can't talk about my case. I'll say it didn't involve either Trump stuff or pro-life. He told the New York Post, I am pro-life personally, but it wasn't those. I will just say there's a lot of information that will come out in the future that people will look at and judge for themselves that goes back 24 months before the 14th. If the governor ever lets it out. So here's the thing. We don't know how the police were able to roll up on this guy while he was exiting the house where he murdered people, or he went into the house and murdered people. So we don't know how the cops came upon him so quickly and then he eluded them. I think he was supposed to die in a shootout with the police, but he escaped. And now he lives to tell the tale. And again, he's singing a different tune that the media was portraying when this first dropped. That's the problem with when you have conspiracy with committing violence, is if the perpetrator gets away and then turns the table, this could blow everything out of proportion. So you have this grand conspiracy of assassinating Trump, another grand conspiracy about undermining Trump and the whole, conspiracy of undermining the democratically elected politician or somebody who's running or whatever. And then a conspiracy involving acts of violence to portray the right as violent and supposedly even connected to the governor. And then going more into deep state actors, Gergen, that's David Gergen, who served 4 terms in red and blue White Houses, dies. Now, if you didn't know David Gergen was a White House advisor to 4 presidents, dead at 83. Gergen, let me just say this. Gergen famously was interviewed by Alex Jones like 20 years ago, even more than that, where he ambushed David Gergen and asked him a few ploy questions, but then started asking him about Bohemian Grove after Alex Jones had snuck in. It was great. It was a great interview. And David Gergen got so pissed because you're violating your oath to keep that secret. Maria Shriver says David Gergen was a total professional and really kind man. My thoughts are with his family. He loved politics and he loved being in service with the country. David Gergen was a deep state actor for the Uniparty. He served in both administrations, Democrat and Republican, much like Zbigniew Brzezinski. These are the guys that the elites get in there to run the show. Much like you saw with Biden, where you had Ron Klain in there who was really running the show. And then when people were pointing the finger at Ron Klain, he's the guy running the White House. And then he's like, well, I'm out of here. So then he left, and it was left to other subordinates who really fucked up after Ron Klain left. That whole thing became a shit show. And then Harold Ford Jr., who was also on the 5. We lost a good one, a really good one. Rest in peace, my friend David Gergen, Washington veteran who advised 4 presidents. Now, I like Harold Ford because he seems to be a moderate when he's on the 5 at least. But he doesn't believe in the deep state. He's like, everybody is involved in politics. David Gergen was not a nice guy. I listened to him in a speech I was covering for the newspaper at the time. And boy, did he talk about the fucking deep state and was very critical, much like almost echoed Zbigniew Brzezinski's famous speech, where he said, there's a political awakening and we have to do something now or everybody is going to know what we've been up to. I wasn't aghast, but I was awestruck at when these guys get up in front of the elite and are telling them what's going on politically. They go, we have to do something. There's a political awakening happening, which is what you see with the conspiracy theorists. People are awakening to how things really work. And then this is what you have. You have people, oh, look how wonderful David Gergen is. You know, he's not wonderful. Zero Hedge, The View host declares violence against ICE agents as part of a justified reckoning. Sonny Hostin of ABC's Infernal Women's Gossip Show turned TDS Rage Fest, The View, intimated Friday that it is excusable for deranged leftists to violently attack law enforcement officers. I don't know if that's true. Western Lensman says Sonny Hostin brushes off left-wing violent attacks on federal agents, saying it's a reckoning. If you mask yourself because you don't want to be seen, there will be a reckoning for some of the actions law enforcement has done. Yeah, they want more of this, so they say. Sonny Hostin's a twit. All those, there is not one bright bulb on The View. I mean, when Barbara Walters started it, it was way more intellectual. Now it's just a bunch of leftist haters. You know, they're violent. There's a reckoning. There's a reckoning. It is the job of the federal government to enforce border policies, immigration policies. Period. There are organizations in the federal government that carry out this work. They go to states all over the nation to carry out this work. There's no reckoning. There's going to be a reckoning for the left wing. All those idiots who go out there and protest law enforcement. Come on. Change the fucking law. You can't. Because you may be able to do it locally, but states, it's not the purview of the states to have law concerning national immigration or border enforcement. Tom Homan slams anti-ICE protesters. You want some? Come get some. They've got morons like this all over the country. This guy wouldn't know what to do, what it's like to serve this nation. This guy hasn't got the balls to be an ICE officer. He hasn't got I guess he's talking about a protester. This guy lives in his mother's basement. In reality, like I said, change the law. You'll never get a nationwide consensus. And even Trump was flirting with this. You want to give people amnesty? It's not really my cup of tea. However, what we need to understand is that if we're ever to arrive at any sort of amnesty program, not that I'm saying I support that, you would have to close the border, have a moratorium on all immigration for at least a year. In that time, or the time frame we have now, is work very diligently to get all the criminal illegal aliens out of the country. Then maybe you could talk about DACA or amnesty or whatever. But until you do those other things, there's not going to be any amnesty. Because all it is going to make, it's going to give an open invitation to others to come here if they think they could be fast-tracked to American citizenship. Pam Bondi is doing something good. Post-millennial DOJ drops charges against Utah doctor in fake COVID vax card case. At my direction, the Justice Department has dismissed charges against Dr. Kirk. It's fraud, but realistically, mandating this vaccination shit, which cost me my career, was fucking bullshit and was unconstitutional. The president of the United States can't mandate all the citizens of the country or whomever, all the residents in the country, to get an experimental vaccine. So what the guy was doing was correct. You know, I could have got a fake card and probably kept my job, but I don't want to have to I don't want to have to lie to do what's right. And then we should talk about this a little bit. Gunman in Kentucky church shooting declared someone's going to have to die after learning his intended target wasn't there. Basically, if you want to know who this guy was, I'm not going to even mention his name. This is a domestic case. He shot a state trooper after being charged, being pulled over. And this is my problem, is like they said a license plate reader gave the state police a heads up. What this guy was doing near the airport, we don't know. He was pulled over, and then he shot the state trooper, and then he abandoned his car and carjacked another car, and it all turns out to be a domestic dispute or domestic violence. He was looking for his estranged wife at this church, and she wasn't there. So apparently the church was a family affair. There were all relatives of this big family that go there. And so he shot several people associated with this family, this big family in which his estranged wife belonged. So there's no really angle here, a conspiracy, except for the fact that how did the state police know to pull this guy over? I mean, this is like, the journalists don't ask these questions. If like something doesn't make sense, you have to clarify, you know, why it should make sense. Why was this guy ever by the airport? Why did his license come up on a plate reader? It could be a simple explanation, but we should have that. As soon as you get the information, he was identified and pulled over after a plate reader gave a red flag. The reporter didn't go like, hey, well, what was the red flag? You know, he could have parking tickets or speeding tickets, or his car might not have been registered. Simple answer, but we don't know. So, more headlines here from Just the News. NIH director Bhattacharya warns U.S. taxpayers are funding science journals compromised by China. This is without, we know this already. The article came out several months ago. Dr. J. Bhattacharya announced a cap starting this fall on how much journals can charge the NIH-supported scientists to make their research findings publicly accessible, getting published. And said fees prop up German-based publisher Springer Nature, which has tremendous investment and interest in China's scientific community. It's a global business. Then goes on to say Nature Medicine, which has published the proximal origin, which is about the COVID-19 thing, dismissing the lab leak theory and saying it was zoonotic. And so this was the whole thing, is that these sorts of things are pushed by the Chinese. Chinese have overwhelming influence throughout the world. Next, for the Wall Street Journal, how China's military is flexing its power in the Pacific. The U.S. sounds alarm and calls on allies to do more as Beijing forces venture further from its shores. I mean, there's not much to say here except we've been at a war with communist China now for at least a decade. Fifth generational war. And at least Trump is trying to do something about it, but we have to do more. Now, what are we going to do about China's naval fleet pushing further into the Pacific? We already lost Australia. Australia is completely infiltrated by the communist Chinese. as is New Zealand, as we saw during COVID. And what's her face, Ardern, the former prime minister of New Zealand, is running around, on a book tour. It's like, she was the worst authoritarian. See, it's the authoritarian in the elite class, the power elite, that developed and nurtured communist China and nurtured a government style there that they prefer and they would like to copy and export all around the world. But nobody wants that. No citizens would want that, but they try to ease you into it. And so they're going to have like a little melding of the free West and the communist Chinese authoritarian state into something that they could deal with. But nobody wants it. People want free. That's this whole resurgence into constitutionalism in the United States. People want to be free. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. So stay hip to the trick. You can join me every day, Monday through Friday, live stream, 10 a.m. on Rumble. Check me out on social media, X, Facebook, Gettermine, True Social. May or may not, I need to take a break in the middle of the week. So if you don't see an episode, that's because I had an emergency. But I appreciate you joining me today. I will see you tomorrow. Respect.
Google me, bitch! Google me!
This is a conspiracy. This is a conspiracy.
The New World Order